Welcome to the Candace's Pack Dog Rescue Show with your host, JP Mendoza.
Thank you very much, Taniya. You know, I love all my guests on this show, but this was a really fun one. She's such a cool, easygoing person, and she's super knowledgeable. I had a lot of fun chatting with her. Please welcome from Ruff Beginnings Rehab, Bethany Wilson. Bethany Wilson from Ruff Beginnings Rehab. How are you doing today, Bethany?
Good. It's a pleasure to be on here with you and see you again.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. You're a very busy woman, so I can only imagine all the things on your to-do list today, because I have been looking. I like to come prepared. Mm-hmm. And I was very amazed by how much you actually have going on between your Facebook and your YouTube and all your your clients and the training videos. It's really awesome. I'm going to get all to that in a minute, but I like to start every interview with trying to find something that I have in common with who I'm speaking with.
Okay.
So let's see. I read in your bio that you love to travel.
Yes.
Okay. And also, correct me if I'm wrong, when you got old enough, you said one of your first stops was New York City?
Yes.
Okay. I'm originally from New York City.
You are not.
I am. Yes. That's where I lived for a long
Where
time. Upper West Side in Manhattan is where I was born. And
very cool.
That's where my family is. So my question is, did you go to school in New York City, or did you just live there? And what was
Okay. So coal miner's daughter, farm girl, wanted to go to the big city, loved acting. And that's what I was pursuing there.
Oh, cool. So, all right, great. Yeah. So that goes to my next question. You are a big fan of Broadway.
Yes, that's theater. I've ended up doing some film just because they pay you more. Sure. I love theater.
That's awesome. So my wife and I are, I guess you would say, newer fans of Broadway. We got really into Broadway a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And what are some of your favorite shows?
Oh my goodness. Well, the first one I ever saw in person that a friend took me to that could afford it was Wicked.
Yes. Yeah.
That it blew me away. I just had tears pouring down my face at just how beautiful it all was. It was the first show I ever saw that I didn't want to be on stage acting. I was so in it.
Sure.
That I was so sucked in that I wasn't like, man, I wish I was up there.
Sure.
And it was just amazing.
So did you live there with the goal to perform in shows, or did you?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
I did, but I quickly just started doing things where I could make money. So I was living with 4 other people. You know how it is.
Oh my God! You can preach on that, because when I was younger, I realized how expensive it was to actually live in the city, and I said, "There's no way I can sustain this." And I'm not the type to have like 6 roommates just to get by. So that's how I ended up in Florida the first time around. Mm-hmm. It's just way more affordable cost of living. But as I mentioned earlier, you have so much going on between your YouTube, your Instagram, your website. You've been on a few TV shows. You're very comfortable in front of the camera, I noticed. So that's why it's not surprising to me that you were an actress. So I think
it took some work. It took some work, though. There's a huge difference between that. I found out there's a huge difference between acting and then being yourself.
Sure.
Now, I'm not saying that I didn't have some skills, that transitioned over, but I mean, when I first started this, I would take 10 videos of myself and I would go to edit it and I would be upset and I would just scrap it. And because it wasn't as easy, 10 years ago, it wasn't as easy to edit as it is now either.
Right. Yep.
And I would take 10 videos of myself and just be like, forget it. I'm just going to train the dog and figure something else out. It was very hard. I mean, I spent years taking ridiculous amounts of videos of myself, trying to get comfortable talking as me. But I was already able to talk. I know that in and of itself can be really difficult, but that was definitely a transition.
Yeah. For me, like we talked a little bit before the show, this is my first time being on the mic, and I've done some not so serious things in front of the camera, but it is weird how, you just keep doing something and you get better at it. So
Yeah.
I remember being pretty uncomfortable in front of the camera, let alone talking. And I went to a tech school for broadcasting, and the whole curriculum was everything around broadcasting, in front of the camera, behind the camera, editing and all this stuff. And I just remember thinking, man, I really don't want to do on camera stuff because it's just so weird. You can't, like, you have to turn certain ways and you have to hit your marks and all this stuff. So I've always, ever since I finished school, I always had a certain appreciation for not only Broadway actors, but actors just in general, because it's just, you guys make it look so easy. So that's pretty awesome. But we should explain how we met. We met at the Lucas Agnew workshop back in October, right?
Yes.
And that's it at Sherry Wolf Lucas's place in her ranch in Templeton.
Oh, so nice. It's like a dream.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like everybody, it's like every dog person's dream, right? Or every animal person's dream. And you had an audit spot.
I did.
Okay. Now I have a little bit of a bone to pick with you because I realized when we all went home, I followed you on Instagram and I saw you working with the dogs and your clients and all this, that. And I said, oh my God, I had no idea this woman was so awesome. Because you had an audit spot, which means you're sitting, taking notes, asking questions, and watching everybody else work. But I never
not to ask so many questions. I take up everybody's time.
Sure. But I realized that I did the whole 3 days. I never got to see you work. So when I saw your videos, I was like, wow, this lady, this woman's awesome. So I feel very cheated, Bethany. Very, very cheated.
Well, thank you. I think.
But no, it's awesome. I really do enjoy following you. So that's why another reason why I'm really happy that you agreed to be on the show. But earlier you mentioned that you grew up on a farm.
Yes.
Can you describe at a young age what it was like working with animals and how you picked up on working with the different energies and personality types of different breeds and animals?
Well, I think there are different aspects that are tough for everybody growing up. Everybody's got their own story to tell. And for me, the ability to walk out of my house and have this land that have these amazing goats and, or a few horses and a few cows. It was incredible. So I would sing to them from a very, very early age, and I would just be with them. I got to see baby goats being born and a baby calf at my uncle's farm. And it was magical. I didn't know that then. It was just normal, but looking back, it was really magical. And it just allowed me to see how animals interact. And which kind of leads me to the dog thing. I had quite a few doses of reality very early on as a kid that dogs are predators. They're predators to other animals that are truly prey. And so seeing the dynamic of between goats and sheep and cows and different types of dogs, Rottweilers versus Australian Shepherds and all of that was, and cats, such an eye opener to me. It was, some of it was harsh, the what I saw and what I dealt with growing up. But it's okay because it's balanced with this beautiful, magical side of life and what life really is and can be. So yeah, looking back, I cherish it so much. And that ability to just walk down the road a little ways, to the goat barn and have that outlet and that quiet. It's pretty incredible. For anyone out there, I live in Los Angeles now. So if I sound overly romantic, that's why, that's why I'm not still there.
Sure. And as a guy that grew up in the city, I've been in the city pretty much most of my life. Mm-hmm. And it's just really funny thinking about it now as an adult, because I've always been into animals. We didn't have a family dog until I was a little bit older. So I didn't really appreciate nature as much as I could have. I've always been into nature documentaries. I've always watched, National Geographic and Animal Planet and all those shows, but it's so different. And I'm a little envious too, because you are part of it. And it sounds like you're describing things you saw that happened in Mother Nature that isn't so fair. It isn't, could quite frankly be pretty brutal at times, but it also can be beautiful. And it makes me realize too that whenever I go somewhere, like for example, my wife and I had to kill time in a very, very small town here in Florida, in North Central Florida. And Bethany, I'm telling you, there was nothing to do. This was just a town. This was just a town. At the average age, it's probably about 75. And we just brought the whole average age down just by arriving. So we're looking on Google and we're trying to find a place to just kind of kill time. And I find a farm. It was just a farm that you can just pay a little entrance fee and you can buy a huge bucket of corn and feed all their animals. And I'm like, hey, why don't we do that? So we went there, and it was just that serenity of just going in there, and that the animals they're expecting you. They know what the bucket means with the feed, and you see cows and chickens, and they had all kinds of wildlife, birds. So it was just one of those reminders of, man, what it would have been like to have this around and be normal, like you said. So, because that was not normal for me. Normal for me was seeing a group of pigeons on the sidewalk in New York City,
Right. And when I say, normal, just to kind of clarify for anyone listening, I'm like, how in my head, it's like how humans are supposed to be, with nature and with animals, and you're supposed to learn that. And by supposed, I just mean from a very natural biological standpoint. You learn how to be with the land and appreciate the land and the animals and all of that. And it's just it's so different now. It's one of the reasons I really want a sanctuary farm out here in LA, because I want to give kids the ability to experience that just like you did.
Yes.
When you were down there. I really want that in the next decade. That's the big goal.
Yeah, and I tell you, it's such a common thing that I hear when we spoke before we started, and I told you that I've interviewed some other people from the workshop, and one of the common goals that I get from talking to other trainers is that they want that large nature property to share with everybody, not only just to have a bunch of dogs, but have maybe some other animals and invite other people and have kids and give them that kind of experience as well. Living in North Central Florida, I'm pretty excited. My wife and I could probably give our future children that kind of experience, but the city kid in me also doesn't want to have them be weirded out by big cities either. So I kind of have to, I want to kind of mix it in and just make it so that they're not afraid of anything and nothing is, kind of weird to them.
I didn't even think about that. It was very scary for me.
Yeah, sure. I can only imagine your first day in New York City, like, oh my God, this is like a concrete jungle. But you mentioned you grew up in Southern Illinois.
Yes, Southern Illinois.
And that's where you met your husband?
No, I actually met my husband in New York City. We had the same acting coach.
That's right. I do remember reading that. Okay, and then that's how you ended up in LA.
It was literally, I met him when he was moving out to LA.
Wow.
I had just gotten to New York City and he was moving out to LA. I still stayed there for a while, and we were like, well, we'll just talk on the phone and see what happens, and I'll still hang out with other people and you can still hang out with other people, and we'll just see what happens. And we stayed connected, and I was like, hey, I'll come to LA. And so that's just where that came from.
That's awesome. That's an awesome story. You also mentioned in your bio that you realized quickly the difference between dogs that grew up in the city and dogs that grew up in rural areas. Can you elaborate on that for people who may not know?
I could write books about it. I get criticized so heavily for some of my advice sometimes for how I train dogs now here in the city. And I'm just like, where are you? When I get some of that criticism, like, where do you live? do you live in some quiet suburban neighborhood? Because I don't, because it's different, where I am now. And I was like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I would train a little differently there. And then I would train even more differently for a farm. It is different. So basically I had a roommate with a little Chihuahua who was just miserable, a nervous wreck. This Chihuahua was held all the time, barely walked. When it was walked, there was no help. There was no structure. There was no, it sits for a treat. It gives paw. Big,
right.
Big deal,
Right.
I was just like, man, this dog is really a mess. I've never seen a dog like this before. And that became a theme. I just kept seeing dogs in the city like this. And then I started doing a little bit of dog walking for a few people that claimed that they couldn't walk their dogs. They couldn't get a dog walker for their dogs. They were so messed up, and I needed money. I was like, I know how to walk. I can walk dogs. Of course, I hadn't done it in the city, but I was like, I can do it. And yeah, that's kind of where the behavioral, came in. It is a lot different. With me growing up with these farm dogs, the expectations were different. The pressure that the dogs are under is different. And so I just did some dog walking out there, and then I enjoyed it much more than waitressing and things like that. But I only did a little bit. It didn't get big till I came out here to LA. And then I really got to see, all these wild, out of control dogs on harnesses that they were told it was cruel if they put them on anything but a harness, but yet they're trying to eat the neighbor dog. And I'm like, where are the priorities here?
Wow.
Come on, and so that's just really where it started. And then I just started doing one-on-one training, and then now it's one-on-one training and board and trains, a decade later or so.
You also,
I started, just like you. I heard you say that, or I thought I heard you say somewhere that you got into Cesar Millan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. Because there wasn't 1,000 YouTube videos on how to train dogs.
Exactly.
And I got my own little dog that I, of course, screwed up. I'd never had a small dog in an apartment before.
Right.
And so I did everything I knew how to do, but it just wasn't enough. When dogs get so much access to you, the way we live with dogs now is so different. They get so much access to us. And she had anxiety as a puppy, separation anxiety, even when I got her. And some things I improved upon, and some things I made worse. So I was like, what do I do? Deep dive into Cesar Millan. That's all there was, besides some other treat, motivated shows, which I knew how to do that. I already tried that, ended up making her worse.
Oh no.
and so, yeah, it was deep. I mean, I studied him religiously.
Wow. Another thing we have in common, because I didn't know. I mean, if you listen in my intro episode, we ended up hiring a behaviorist to help us with Candace, because she was a nervous wreck also. Nervous wreck, full of anxiety. She was afraid of me. We had no idea what her history was. And this behaviorist, although she was not and still isn't a Cesar Millan fan, she does respect him, and she preaches dog psychology. So she introduced me to this concept of being with dogs and teaching them in a way that they understand. And I was completely hooked. And I had to find, this is after Dog Whisperer already was off the air. So I had to find old episodes. I bought all his books, and I read all his books over the course of a couple of years. So yeah, I got really into it. You also mentioned that you did some work at a rescue.
Well, that's where I practiced.
Yes.
And then I practiced on my little dog, and I was practicing on the maybe handful of dogs I was dog walking for. And I was like, I need to work with more difficult dogs. So yeah, I started working at rescues and asking them, to allow me to use slip leashes. Sometimes they would let me, sometimes they wouldn't.
Oh, wow.
Some of the dogs were so out of control that I would honestly, I'm not advocating anyone do this, but it's like they were unwalkable, and they were like, well, Bethany says she can walk them. And so I would take them around the corner on their like choke chain or martingale or harness, whatever it was. And I'd put a slip leash on him, and I'd try not to use it, but it was purely safety. And these dogs couldn't be walked. And so I would just do it there as a backup for safety. And then I just ended up over time earning a lot of trust over the course of like a year with a few rescues, that they gave me more, they gave me more liberty. They gave me more, flexibility for what I wanted to do. And they were like, just don't, tell anyone adopting that you're going to start using this or this or this. And then another year went by, and then they're like, this is amazing. You need to teach our adopters how to do this, and so it just, went from there. I just had to slowly build trust with a few rescues. And that's where I really learned, it's interesting. I use training tools now. I use Ecollar, I use prong collar, I use all of that. But my gosh, those early years of skills I developed with only a slip leash and my energy.
Yes.
I just wouldn't trade those for anything in the world, because I think owners do this too. Trainers do it. I've done it and went through it, where you get too reliant on tools.
Right.
And having that foundation to just be like, forget this, just get rid of all this. Give me a slip leash. Everybody be quiet. Give me some breathing room. And let me just feel out this dog, Yes. And that's always something I try to remind myself to go back to if I'm ever frustrated with how a dog is doing. The training tools are more for, honestly, the owner, in my opinion. They build such great leverage, especially with city dogs. My goodness, they build such great leverage. And then of course for off leash, I'd never have a dog off leash without an e-collar now, sure. in hindsight, just for safety. But they really are that bridge between trainer and owner. So I love my training tools. They're never going anywhere. But man, that foundation is just crucial. And I can tell for any trainers out there watching this, sometimes when I work with other trainers, I can tell if they started with tools. And I'm like, look, you're great, but why don't you get rid of those? Go spend a few months training some rescue dogs with just a slip leash, or whatever they allow you to use. But yeah, anyway, I could get nostalgic. I thought we were just going to talk about concepts, and I'm just getting so nostalgic with all these things. But yeah, that's where I really, connected with you and saw you working, at the Lucas Agnew seminar too. And I was like, oh yeah, that's my base as well. That's my foundation as well, Yeah.
And a couple things, because like you, so right now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to expose myself to as many dogs as I can, so that I can get more comfortable dealing with different breeds and different personalities and different pack positions.
Right.
And I shadow at a place here and that with a trainer, and he does focus on dog psychology. Mm-hmm. He advocates for the e-collar. He has no problem using the e-collar. He uses it very similarly to how Sherry was teaching it at the workshop. Okay. And I was glad about that, because I wanted to become more comfortable with the e-collar. It's not something that I have experience with, so I wanted to get more comfortable with. But I have to tell you, Bethany, that sometimes when we have a dog and part of the rehab protocol might be e-collar, there's a part of me that thinks, man, is there any way we can do this without the e-collar, just to see see if never. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if it's ego on my part or if it's just something like I don't want to say that I feel like tools are a crutch, but sometimes it feels like it's like you said, when you had the slip leash and your energy, it's like I want to put that to the test, but it's always what's best for the dog, right?
So here's the difference. You're right. It is what's best for the dog. However, also, what's best for the owner, because in my experience, and in my experience studying Cesar Millan and a lot of his past clients, or not clients, but like from the show and stuff like that, they're not Cesar Millan, and they're not me, and they're not you.
Right.
They don't live in this world of energy and dogs, and they're just people with kids and full-time jobs and run into soccer practice and no time. Now, I'm not trying to make excuses for not training your dog, but I have just found that it is crucial for more success for the owners. That's what I've found. That's why I will never not use tools. And when a client says, well, can I ever wean off of this? I'm like, just do your job to the best you can for 6 months and reach back out to me, because it has to do with how much time you have, how consistent you are, how much work you can put into the dog. That's a huge part of it. And then the other part of it is the genetics of the dog. How bad is this dog? Like, I hope you didn't hear him earlier, but I've got a dog whining in crate, and they've had him for 3 years. He's about 8 years old, and he is one of the most anxious, aggressive dogs I've ever come across. And they know better. They haven't asked me if they're going to wean off tools, because they never are. But some people do. Some people do. And so it's a combination of the genetics of the dog with how much work can you put in. Because I can wean off tools with my dogs, but I don't expect that of anyone else, And so sometimes if you're training the dog, I like your mindset. But if you're training the dog for someone else, for someone's family, in my opinion, you have to have a different mindset about it. Your job is to help that dog continue to be successful in its home life, and help the owners to the best of your ability, and teach them everything but also know that they're not going to be able to do it the way that you do it.
Sure.
They're just not. So most of them anyway.
That is a golden piece of advice. Thank you, Bethany. I really appreciate that. That's awesome. I'm going to keep that in mind. How do you get people, because you mentioned a few minutes ago that just a slip lead in your area can get some looks from people or criticism. How do you handle training, let's say in a public space, and you're training that dog and exposing them to whatever their stimulus is, but you're using an e-collar? How do you go about the criticism that you may get from somebody because you're using an e-collar or a tool that's perceived to be like a shock collar or something that's hurting the dog? How do you go about that? Because I would imagine you're pretty seasoned and used to the criticism by now.
Yes. Yeah. And I try to remember to prep my clients as well. Because it's not just, if I get weird looks for slip leash or criticism for slip leash, it's because we're talking about using pressure up in the air to calm the dog down, especially if they're trying to bite me or bite another dog. But it's like, just so your viewers know, it's like these dogs go out with sometimes, like, I'll just use this dog I just mentioned as an example. He has a muzzle. He has a dominant dog collar. He has a prong collar and an e-collar.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's not always that crazy. But what's the most common is just e-collar, prong collar. That's the most common. And they look intense, and then people see you holding a remote, and they immediately look at you. A lot of times for the larger dogs, they're like, oh, I get it. But I could have this poodle that wants to take my fingers off, and they'll feel bad for it, right?
Sure, of course. That's interesting. So basically what you're saying is, if it's a big, scary pit bull or Rottweiler or German Shepherd, it's okay. But the moment you put it on a little dog, now you get the dirty looks.
Or a softer
incredible
looking dog. But honestly, e-collar causes a lot of vocalization sometimes. But honestly, these dogs were vocal before. That's why they're training. It's just when you start trying to apply, discipline and more self-control and impulse control, they are still very, very vocal, just in a different way. Instead of barking and trying to annihilate their environment, they might be more whiny and yippy. And so that's what will really draw in the looks, And I'm just so used to it. It just kind of rolls off my back. And I've kind of gotten pretty good at someone making a comment towards me. And I can tell if it's just a comment and I need to just be like, okay, have a nice day, versus a comment that they kind of want to know a little bit more. And I might have a conversation with them. I'm not as good about that online, figuring that out. I get sucked into a lot of propaganda because someone says something that I think they actually want to know knowledge, and they don't. They just want to tell me how bad I am. Or even for muzzling a dog. Like, we have a great pit bull rescue out here, and they did this whole thing about how important the muzzle was for this pit bull and how wonderful she is in her new home. The level of hate they got was insane.
Wow.
And so it's just really, really sad. It's like that muzzle allowed her to be able to go for a walk in the park, you know, if for the off chance an off leash dog might approach her, you know, otherwise she'd never be able to get to go to the park, you know. And I just try to prep my clients for this. I'll just give you a little story real quick, and then we can move on. But my biggest one is, I had this girl with this really amped up cattle dog. You know how cattle dogs can get.
Oh yeah.
It was bad. Going after skateboards, people jogging, you know, it snowballed into everything, redirecting onto their leg, you know, even though he was friendly. Dog reactive, lived down in Long Beach, where it's skateboards everywhere, just really everywhere. And she did training with us, and she went home for about 2 months, and she was taking him into like a Walgreens or something like that. Okay. And he's doing great, by the way, like really good. And a woman flipped out on her for seeing the prong collar. And she was like, "You don't understand. 2 months ago, I wasn't even able to walk him. Like, this is amazing." And the woman just, you know, was screaming in her face, and she called me crying. And, you know, I just had to tell her, I'm like, you've got to do what you think is best for your dog, you know, even if it's not what I think is best. I said, so you have to remember that you were not able to walk this dog 2 months ago, and you are now. I said, just hold on to that, and don't let one person mess up this beautiful world you have worked so hard to maintain, you know. And she's gotten tougher as a result, but she's not the only person that's gone through something like that, especially in the city. She's really not. But it's not even just that. When I did e-collar training with my little dog, Happy, my parents were very skeptical. They did not understand at all. They're like, okay, we put e-collars on the Rottweiler so he doesn't leave the yard, but you're putting an e-collar on as a daily training tool on a little dog. And so I honestly just didn't talk to them about it for a couple of years. And then when I visited home, they were amazed at her improvement. They couldn't believe it. And they were like, "Oh, maybe you do know what you're doing." You know, so yeah. It's just seeing is believing. Proof is in the pudding. You know, that's really what it boils down to for me. And that is what allows me to keep going and not worry about it and develop a thicker and thicker skin about it.
I really appreciate how open you are about using tools and pretty much every tool that you use and the reason why you use it and how it helps the particular dog. Because I think the only way to really deal with ignorance is education.
Yes.
Even though people may not want to hear it, they see this scary looking prong collar or this e-collar that they think is a shock collar. You may never be able to change that person's mind, but maybe for every one person that is like that, you get the 2 or 3 reasonable people who are willing to be open-minded and say, okay, why is she using this? She doesn't look like a terrible person. She doesn't look like a dog torturer. So there's got to be a reason why she's using this. And the dog is not yelping or, you know, is acting shut down or anything. So I think there's got to be a lot more reasonable people out there. And it's trainers like you that I think help people like me, because I'm still pretty green to this. Right. And like I said earlier, the e-collar was something that I had no experience with. I was always told it was a quote bad thing, right. but I didn't want to just take 1 or 2 other trainers' opinions on it. I wanted to really just keep an open mind, because I know that to get good at anything, you got to see all sides and make your own decisions. Right. And
it sounds like you still have so much more exploring to do with tools.
Oh, sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because I don't even use tools exactly like, you know, Brian and Sherry do at the Lucas Agnew seminar. I do kind of a combination of them and some other people, you know, that I've followed. And so there's just so much more, you know, and for me, myself as well, I try to do at least 1 seminar a year to keep myself fresh and not in my own head about what I think needs to be done. Because you always think that, well, I would never do that. But then you meet the dog that needs it, you know, and then you go to a seminar like the Lucas Agnew seminar, and I'm reminded more of the basics. Don't forget to spend plenty of time on the basics. For me, I was super surprised at this. I'm a bit firmer than Sherry and Brian are with the e-collar, I'll admit. But it was so funny to watch Brian work one of those dogs. And if anybody out there ever gets a chance to go to one of those seminars, you really should. They're so considerate and great, just great teachers and knowledge. But he was working a dog that was very uncomfortable for a pretty long period of time, and trying to figure out what Brian wanted. Remember that pity?
You're talking about Jax?
It was that pity that you were working with. Actually,
oh, yes.
That gray pity. Yeah.
Roxy.
I don't want to get too specific because nobody knows what we're talking about, but
okay.
He's working on recall with a dog on e-collar, low-level e-collar with slow increasing rates, which I call those motivational levels. A little bit of heat motivate the dog to figure it out with leash guidance. And I was like, man, I could, there's a way to make it a little bit more clear what you're asking of that dog when it's just really pushing through the levels. And I asked a question about it, and he was like, well, why don't you want the dog to spend more time learning how to problem solve? Because right now, that's such a huge issue with dogs that are in the home with owners that live in a bubble. They don't know how to problem solve. And so I really learned to make sure I'm not rushing those beginning phases of e-collar. And it's okay to let the dog struggle a little bit, not go right to a level that on e-collar, because so for anyone watching or hearing this, the e-collars we use are usually 0 to 100 levels. So I can whisper with it or I can shout, and we teach it at a whisper. But I could have found a level that would have created more clarity more quickly with that pity, just confused about, what he was asking. But it's like, why would you do that? Why would you rob them too quickly of the ability to problem solve that scenario? Because we have these dogs in our homes that live in these bubbles now with us, that we don't challenge them enough, and they lose their natural problem solving abilities. So seeing him do that was just another reminder for me that I'd almost forgotten about, that it's okay for the dog to struggle a little bit, not that I don't do that, I do, but in other ways, not in those beginning phases. I would have been like, come on, good job, or a tug of the leash, or a little bit of a higher level to speed up the process. But it's like, why do that? Because the whole point is we're trying to help these dogs get their problem solving skills back that they've lost. And so my point is, anybody who is interested in dog training, not just being a dog trainer, but training their own dogs, going to seminars, you take all of this information and figure out how it can help you at home. And I don't care how long you've been doing it, there is always more to learn or to remember. That's how it was for me. It's
Sure.
Just so great. It's so good. And it's so important for everybody not to get stuck in their own way of thinking. I'm a little bunny trail. I'm working with a trainer on the East Coast, and she's just so disheartened at how closed off trainers are about their community, how they train, their secrets, all this stuff. And I'm like, that's just ridiculous. I was like, come hang out with me for a while. I'll show you everything that we do, and that's why it's just so important. Because I think a lot of, it's not just dog training. I think a lot of industries are like that.
Sure.
They're closed off. So anyway, little bunny trail.
Sure. One thing I remember about the pit bull that I was working with, if you remember this moment, it could have been the first or second day I was working with her, and Brian had me have the e-collar in one hand, the long line in the other hand, and then I had the pit bull who was just aloof, not really paying attention to me. And I was trying to get her on the place board. So
Right.
I'm trying to wrangle the long line, which I didn't have any experience with. I had the e-collar in my right hand, which I didn't have any experience with. And I had
you got to feel like a client.
100%. But it was so great because not only was I learning how to do all this, but I was doing it in a comfortable environment, right? I wasn't doing it worrying about, oh my God, what are all these people in public going to think when I'm, jacking up this e-collar, trying to figure out the working level and all this and that. And I do remember there was a moment too, where a couple of trainers in the front were just kind of questioning, asking, why would you use an e-collar on this dog? Do you remember that?
I remember every bit of it because I'm in the back biting my tongue, not to intercede on, it's not my seminar, Bethany, keep your mouth shut. I remember every bit. I kind
of wish you had interjected, but the greatest thing about it was I was already feeling insecure with everything I was doing. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to hurt this dog with the Z-collar. Like, that's not why I'm here. So I'm already,
bless your heart.
Yeah. So I'm already feeling insecure about it. And then Brian said one thing that I remembered since that day. I mean, it's a longer answer, but he said to them, there's never a good reason not to use the e-collar. And I'd never heard anybody say that before. And I was actually really shocked when he said that. And I was like, wow, really? I was like, I guess I had so much more to learn about it. I still do, but I ended up talking to Sherry about it afterwards. And she kind of elaborated more on it. And it was just one of those things about not looking at the tool as a punitive tool. It's a tool to help the dog focus and pay attention to the handler and probably 1,000 other reasons that,
No, I totally see that. I remember him saying that. It's kind of a beautiful thing.
Yes.
And it's a tool that, allows you, because Brian's been in this game a long time, and like many trainers, they used the leash and they just had to correct at a distance so firmly to keep dogs from chasing cars. The huge like highlight things like you're trying to kill deer, things like that. There's a few times where you really got to correct that to suppress that emotion. And for him, it was just like the e-collar allows me to be the most gentle trainer I've ever been in my entire career, and I'm in the back just like, yeah. But what really got me is like when when that Pitty was, struggling, working through still very low level, but she just didn't understand to follow the leash pressure. And he was he was giving her a second to think about it before increasing pressure. And the whole the front, those people, they were like, oh, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, here we go again.
Yeah, exactly.
Meanwhile, I'm holding the leash like, oh my God. Like,
and it was just, and gosh, you poor thing. I didn't even think about the fact that, cause I was a little like, oh my God, and just trying to keep my mouth shut and let them do their job as the trainers. I didn't even think about, you having to be on the other end of that leash in trouble. And that kind of leads me to my next point that I always want to get across to my clients is that I make mistakes with every dog that I work, every single dog. How in the world are you supposed to learn what the dog needs? If you aren't willing to do that. I shot a video the other day and I did something weird. There was like heavy traffic. And I said the dog's name and come, and I said it really weird. I said it the way I tell my clients not to say it. And the dog didn't listen to me. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, okay, so I'm going to leave this in here because that was a horrible recall.
Right.
And that's okay. I'm actually not even going to correct him for not listening because I'm not even sure what just came out of my mouth. I wouldn't have listened to that either, And so my point is just that everybody makes mistakes. They accidentally overcorrect their dog or they undercorrect them, and it causes the dog to continue to load immensely, and the dog has an explosion and they don't understand why. It's like, well, you got to go home, take a breath, and do better next time. Every trainer should be doing that most of the time with every dog. that's how you figure things out. And dogs are so resilient, which is also why you can't just correct dogs all the time and magically make them be better. It doesn't work that way. And that would, if I could just use treats or correct a dog a few times and they'd be trained, that'd be great. But that's not how it works. So dogs are very resilient most of the time. There are some exceptions. So you can make mistakes. One of those exceptions might be the dog that you got, Candace.
Mm-hmm.
She's very sensitive.
Yes,
very sensitive. If she came in for a board and train, I'd probably tack on an extra week just to give me breathing room so I could go extra slow, because I wouldn't want to make a mistake with her,
right.
Correction wise. And if I did, even body language, sometimes these dogs, if you use too much body language, they're like, whoa.
Yes.
And it might take me 24 hours to get them back where they were. But my point is just that everyone is so afraid to make a mistake with training tools. And so I try to encourage my clients that take a breath. It's okay. Now, if they do have a really sensitive dog, I'll be a bit harder on them for it. But most of the time, I'm like, you learn from mistakes. That's how you learn, and you do better, and you become more self-aware. You become more in tune with your dog because you don't want to make another mistake, you know?
Bethany, you have something that at Ruff Beginnings Rehab that I think is so awesome, and it actually quite frankly makes me a little jealous that I'm not close to you in LA. Do you want to talk about the Ruff Beginnings Rehab Aftercare Program that you have?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'd love to. So the name of that actually came from an employee of mine, Maxine. She's my head trainer. And it was just a way to help people understand I wasn't going to leave them. So many people ask me, well, what do you do after the training's over? I'm like, I still work with you and I still help you if you need to. And they're shocked, you know? And so the Aftercare Program is a lot of things. It's they can email me, call me anytime if I've ever worked with their dog. We do monthly pack walks, which we haven't because of COVID, but we're going to start again soon. We can finally, go outside and feel a little bit more comfortable with rules. But they get monthly pack walks if they're lucky to be local. And they can come and for free, they can bring friends. And we have rules, of course, there's no greeting, all of that. And the dogs can be around other dogs with like-minded training without the pressure of interacting like on another type of pack walk. So those are free to anybody who's trained with us. And they can come see me anytime. We can schedule something on my property free of charge. I've never had anybody take advantage of it. I used to charge a small fee because I thought that brought more value. People take it more seriously. But no, if you've already done a board and train with me, they clearly take it very seriously. So I changed that. And I just charge if I have to go off property. And so for me, it's just so important. If I have clients from out of town, we get quite a few from Washington and things like that. I will do videos for them and all kinds of things to try to remind them their individual case, what the follow-up looks like. Because if I don't get to see them for that follow-up, they'll have a problem. And I'm like, give me 3-4 days to shoot a quick video for you, and send it to you. So anyway, it's just to make sure people don't feel abandoned, because a lot of people I've worked with have worked with other trainers that didn't even finish their one-on-one lessons or didn't ever get back to their email. And that just blows my mind. If I ever don't get back to someone's email, it's because I accidentally forgot about it and they should email me again, So anyway, that's just kind of what prompted that is training. To try to make training seem simple is such an art. And there are trainers out there that do it. And in my opinion, the concepts are simple, but putting it into action for each individual dog is quite complicated.
Oh yeah.
If there's anywhere I lack as a trainer, in my opinion, trying to be as self-aware as possible, I continue to try to simplify concepts for owners that aren't trainers, but I struggle with it because we get so many different personality types where we use the e-collar differently with the different dogs. And so I struggle trying to make it easier for them. And I'm always trying to be better at it. There are trainers that are much better at it than I am, but that's also part of it. That's an insecurity of mine, to be honest. is I know I'm not as good as I should be at simplifying these concepts, so they really just know what to do when they go home. So for me, I'm like, look, there's more to this. Please feel free to come back, because let's try to take these concepts in stages, and there's always more you can learn. And I always want people to feel free to come back and learn more, or help me clarify what I wasn't clear enough about in the beginning, because it's just so much information. So some of it in hindsight kind of comes from a bit of an insecurity of mine, because I feel like I need more time to get these concepts across for some of these more difficult dogs.
Sure. And I love how open you are and how honest you are about all of these things, because I think there are a lot of trainers, specifically on Instagram, I must say, that they kind of make it seem like it's so easy. Like, here's the before and here's the after.
Yeah. And
it's one of those things where, now putting so much of the concepts into practice, 1000% agree with you. It's so much harder to actually put into practice per the individual dog.
Yeah.
And you can have all these sound bites like, exercise, discipline, affection, but what exactly does that mean for this dog specifically? You know what I mean?
Right.
So trying to come up with a specific plan of action to rehab a specific dog and that specific dog's problems or issues, that's amazing. That's an art form, and that's something it takes years to master.
Yes, it absolutely is an art form. It's something I'm constantly striving to do better at, finding that balance of not overcomplicating it for owners that are already having to learn new tools, but yet helping them understand that there is, like, this is when you correct, this is when you're considerate, but there's all this space in between that would also be great if you learn, because you are still going to struggle. So come on back. And once you kind of get a handle on that, come on back and let me show you all the fun middle work that actually rehabs your dog. It's like, okay, you can control your dog walking down the street, but it's like, to really rehab, I'm like, please come back. It's a lot to take in. And then if we go down that road, in a perfect world, I would see clients 5 times before they took their dogs home. I don't have time for that. No, nobody does, but I would, because I'd make them come once or twice and just do body language, energy, learn what they're looking at, that kind of stuff, and then come back and learn the tools. But it's just, I wouldn't have anybody do training, I don't think. It'd be too much coming back and forth in a short time. But that's what I encourage people to come back for. I'm like, I always tell everybody, like, this is probably what's going to happen. You're going to get a little too reliant on the tools. And so when you hit a frustration point, probably around the 90 days or the 120 days, come on back and I'll remind you how to use your body and use your leash to back up what you're saying with e-collar. And it'll remind you of a lot of what you learned in the beginning, and you will have such a better time. And half the people take me up on it and half of them don't. Like I said, I've never had anybody take advantage. So yeah.
Bethany, I wanted to mention a quote that this is paraphrasing. It's a quote that you said when you spoke with Voyage LA magazine. And it's something that you said that really hit home for me, because it's been transitional for me when it comes to career-wise, trying to do something more with the dog rescue and doing something different, working on doing a for-profit. I hesitate to say dog training, but that's essentially what I'll be doing. But at the same time, I'm also learning. You said being an entrepreneur is never a smooth road. If it is, then you're probably not working hard enough. I agree so much with that statement. It's been so hard. Whenever you're trying to do something new, especially when you're working by yourself, it's like 10 times harder, and just trying to learn what you need to know to be good, and then trying to get the hands-on experience, and then doing everything, the administrative and the business setups. It totally rung a bell with me when you said that. So kudos to you on that.
I'm
Bethany,
glad, because I find it to be true.
Yeah. Even 10 years later, right?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
sure.
Definitely. Don't get me wrong. I would love it if I was comfortable just having a couple dogs at a time and it was just me. I just did some dog training. You know, I would love to have that simpler life. But it's not in my DNA. I say that I would love it, but I wouldn't love it. You know, It's not in my DNA, which has got to be the entrepreneurial side. But people, I know trainers that are so happy out there doing that. You know, they just have 1 to 2 training dogs at a time. They don't do like the boarding and a lot of the following up and things like that. And they're so happy and they do good work and their clients are happy. And that's just not me.
Yeah.
But however, when I have a nervous, breakdown every 6 months, I'm like, I wish I could be one of those people, but I can't.
Sure. Bethany, I want to ask you 3 questions and you can answer them in a rapid fire kind of way. This is how I like to end.
Oh my God, I'm terrible at rapid fire, but I will try.
Do your best, okay? Ready?
Yep.
What's the one thing you wish dog owners would understand?
Oh, that dogs are animals and predators.
Okay. What's the one thing you wish dog trainers would understand?
That the more tools you have in your toolbox that you develop over the course of years, you'll help so many more people than closing yourself off to one type of training. And I don't just mean tools. I mean like clicker training. I used to be like, no way, I would never clicker train a dog. I've got enough stuff in my hand. I've seen some amazing counter conditioning with clicker trainings. I don't just mean tools. I mean everything. The more tools you develop in your toolbox, the more people you will help. And isn't that why we're here? You know?
Exactly. And last question is one of my favorite ones. Is there anyone that you personally know in the dog world that you think deserves more recognition? Maybe somebody I should perhaps invite as a guest on the show?
Oh no, you put me on the spot. Oh man, let me think. Yes, absolutely yes. She's amazing. She's her name is Angie. She's from Jebel Dog, Jebel, Jebel Dog, and she's from Canada.
Awesome.
That's who is someone who not only does she deserve more recognition, she's going to get it. The way she explains things is always has this primal real animal element. And yes, she's so different than me in the way that she explains things. It makes me angry because I'll read some of her stuff and I'll talk to her and I'm like, oh, I got to like repeat that 20 times so I can explain it the same way. She just has a different bit on things than you're used to hearing. So yeah.
That's awesome. That sounds, I'm going to look her up right after this and I'm going to follow her. She's on Instagram, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect.
Jebel Dog.
Bethany Wilson from Ruff Beginnings Rehab. Thank you so much for being here. Next time I'm in LA, we're going to go out to eat and we're going to share a giant plate of sweet potato fries with ketchup.
No. Oh my gosh. That almost just like, I was so close to being like, I can't even sit next to this dude. It was the most disgusting thing, everybody. Who does that? Who does that?
Just to explain the inside joke, we all went out to eat after one of the workshop days. And I was sitting next to Bethany and I ordered sweet potato fries with ketchup. And I saw the look on your face and it was as if I had insulted your whole family. It was you just insult food, which is a huge deal. It was so scary. I mean, it was very difficult to sit next to you, JP, and like listen to you and bond with you. It was very difficult. Thank you so much for being here, Bethany.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you very much, Bethany, for being on the show. You can follow her on Instagram and Facebook at Ruff, R-U-F-F, Beginnings Rehab. You can also check out her website at ruffbeginningsrehab.com.
Thank you for listening to the Candace's Pack Dog Rescue Show. For news updates and training tips, make sure you follow us on Instagram and Facebook. You can find us at Candace's Pack Dog Rescue. If you would like to support the rescue, please visit our website at cpackdogrescue.org. For questions and comments, you can contact us at cpackdogrescue@gmail.com. And if you like the show, please subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your podcast app.